You're watching or listening to Strangers in Space, and for the next 60 minutes, maybe, we're going to be talking about Dot and Bubble, so you don't have to. Hi, I'm JR.
Hi, I'm Matt.
And I'm probably not the Ian you were expecting. No, I've messed that one up completely, didn't I? I always do this when I get given lines.
Great stuff.
And I am Ian, but probably not the Ian you were expecting.
And that is because Dylan. So this is mad. So Dylan has sent you in his stead.
Yes.
Basically. So,
although from listening to his reactions to the Shooter Getaway era, I don't believe I'm on the same side as him, because he's been hating it, hasn't he? And I've been quite like.
This is the next thing I was going to do. Was I've got my trusty 58.5-second egg timer here. So Ian, who for the sake of this podcast will be known as Kelly.
Okay.
For anybody who's watching, for anybody who's listening, that's going to go completely over your head, and I'm not going to bother. But for the sake of anybody who's watching, Kelly, you've got 58.5 seconds to tell me, or tell us, everybody, what you think of the RTD2 era so far.
I have liked it on the whole, but with lots of caveats. And nearly every single episode, I have had a bit of a, I'm not sure about that, and maybe I'd have done that different. Did it need another draft? But I have really, really liked it. And the energy's great, and Shooter Get was amazing. I'm looking at the sand now. And,
you don't have to go the whole 60 seconds.
I don't have to go for the sand. Amelia Gibson's brilliant, and I haven't hated any, which is good for a Doctor Who fan, because we usually manage to hate them quite easily. But I always go in
I always think, as long as you go in wanting to like, things can disappoint you, right? But you should never go in expecting or wanting to dislike anything.
No, I really could have done with more David Tennant. Not anything to do with Shooter Getaway not being there, but it was having him for just 3 was quite frustrating, because I really liked him being back.
Were you a big Tennant fan from first time? You've done your 58
I've done
seconds.
The
we better cut this second. We're cutting this conversation off right here and moving along. No, were you a Tennant fan the first time then?
Oh, it was, yeah, totally. I mean, I'm 52 years old, so I am very much
youngster.
I was born on episode 2 of Curse of Peladon. Is when I was born.
Youngster.
And so I was very much. I've only just got over Tom Baker not being the Doctor, so that is. And I'm not even joking.
Okay, because David Tennant.
I still shudder when I see the Starfield titles, because that never seemed right, and it's taken me a long time to get used to Peter Davison being the Doctor. And so when New Who came around, I was very much, oh God, this is probably going to be awful, isn't it? And then I really enjoyed it. Not quite from the off, but I got into it. I love Christopher Eccleston, and then I thought David Tennant was brilliant. And I just, and I've kind of really, really loved it ever since. But I did go off it a bit during the Moffat era. And
right, banned from the rest of this podcast.
This is why we need a CV when people come on this podcast, so we can go through and vet them to make sure that they're candidates.
The vetting process has failed. And
to be honest, all opinions are equal, but some opinions are obviously clearly less equal than others.
Yeah, and I'm not quite as enthusiastic about the Chibnall era as Dylan is, but I still really like a lot of it. And I'm just rewatching it for Joe Ford's Strictly Come Hamster, which may come into discussion of today's episode. So I'm reappraising Jodie Whittaker, even though I did quite like her at the time. So that's kind of my Who history. But Tom Baker, and then everyone else is very much lesser beings underneath Tom Baker.
Right, and now, because we obviously need to get on and talk about Dot and Bubble, so I'm going to give you another 58.5 seconds, just in case anybody watching or listening to this doesn't know. Ian Winterton is who we're talking to, right? Because, I mean, there's some people listening who might be thinking, who the hell is this guy? So for the sake of I mean, there probably won't be. And obviously, clearly, it'll be in the notes and that.
Get to the
point.
Just in case. Sorry.
But just in case, 58 and a half seconds you've got just to tell anybody who doesn't know who you are and why you're here. I mean, why you're here on this planet, basically.
Turn it back over. Get the sound back in.
You're going to take the entire 58 and a half seconds, right?
Oh, no, probably not. Quicker than that.
All right, here it goes.
Yeah, I'm Ian Winterton. I'm a writer and Doctor Who fan, and Doctor Who people will probably know me best for writing Cutaway Comics. And I'm currently writing lots and lots of Gods and Monsters. And I also have adapted Hungry Moon, which is a horror thing, which has lots of Doctor Who people in it, like Peter Davison, Colin Baker, Louise Jameson, Mina Anwar. I think that's all the Doctor Who people that are in it. And so that's what I was editing this morning, still getting on with that. And I've also got some Big Finish coming up, which I can't talk about.
You just have.
Yeah, you just said it. I mean, you can't throw it out there and then try and sort of claw it back.
I literally can't talk about it because I don't have any ones already out. My first ones are coming out in 2025, and I want to do more. So,
right, that's your 58 and a half seconds. So one further question before we get into it, and this is our window into talking about the thing that we're actually supposed to be talking about. And that question is this. Dylan couldn't make it. He said, have Ian instead. Have Ian instead. Ian wants to talk about this episode. Which makes it sound like there was a specific reason. Or maybe just you were enthused, or maybe you were unenthused or something. But, okay, give me your initial reaction to the episode. And was there a specific thing, or was it just...
I think because I do podcasting myself, I forgot to mention in the thing, I do the Cutaway Bunker.
I give you 58 and a half seconds. It's gone.
I know. But it was weird that I didn't know Dylan was trying to send someone in his stead. So this is obviously synchronicity. But I was really enthused. My routine is to watch Doctor Who at breakfast with my son, because I usually am too tired at midnight. So I either watch it at midnight occasionally and then watch it at breakfast with my son. But mostly I watch it for the first time with my son, who's 8 and loves Doctor Who. And I was really enthused by this episode. But also because I've been rewatching the Jodie Whittaker season 11, her first season, I came up with loads of headcanon-y type things that made me even more excited. And I thought, I wish I could go on and on at length to people, and there's no one to talk about Doctor Who because everyone hasn't seen it yet. All the people in my group, my Manchester group Warp, so many of them watch it religiously on transmission, so you can't go on the group chat and talk about it. So I've just been in that. I love talking nonsense about Doctor Who, as I assume you probably do as well. So I really wanted to have somewhere to as an outlet, because it's not venting, because I really love the episode, but it's just lots of headcanon-y stuff I want to talk about as well.
Right, there we go. You loved it, Matt.
Yeah,
we'll come back to the headcanon-y stuff. Matt, what did you think?
Well, apparently, I was watching the making of. Apparently, it was a big metaphor, and that just went completely over my head. I had no idea.
No.
So it didn't go over my head that it was a metaphor. I actually really liked it. But like Ian, with the other episodes, I have caveats, and I get the feeling that this is the sort. If you're writing a PhD, this wouldn't be a chapter of the PhD. This would be a footnote in the PhD. But RTD would like to think that it was a chapter of the PhD. So it's one of those episodes that I think the makers think that this is going to be big ground shifting and surprising, and actually it was quite neatly done and effective, but not all that subtle. Or
but it was. But when you said apparently this is a metaphor, I'm like, it's not like RTD to do metaphor. Usually he just rams it down your throat. And I got the impression while I was watching it that I was having it rammed down my throat. So I'm wondering now if it was actually a metaphor for, I don't know, the destruction of the Amazon or something.
So the metaphor RTD was talking about in the making of, because I've recently watched the making of, and the making of really Doctor Who Unleashed really winds me up, because I just,
why do you do it to yourself?
Because I also find it interesting, because I want to see like Neil Gorton talking about whatever.
Do you know what? They make the extras on the Blu-ray collection box sets for our generation of Doctor Who fans, and they make Unleashed and the new podcast and everything else for the under 30s. That's who that's for. It's not for us.
The metaphor that RTD proudly announced was a metaphor was the bubble, being you're in a bubble of like a close-knit community. And that's why I was slightly ironic, because I think that metaphor was very clear. And I also thought it was slightly hypocritical of RTD to talk about how everybody else is in a bubble when he's brought back Phil Collins and Neil Gorton, Murray Gold, presumably a collection of tame script editors who don't say to RTD, or you wouldn't understandably say to RTD. So I think it's that. I think it was very on the nose. I don't think RTD was possibly the best person to write about these metaphors with his
we come back to that.
He has. But I really enjoyed it anyway, because I thought it was really effectively done, and I liked having a really sort of a psychopathic, vile, horrible character basically lead the whole thing. One other thing. I think it's possibly a mistake to have 2 Dr. Light episodes, one after the other, because Ncuti Gatwa has now spent 2 weeks basically not doing that much at all, and it does make him look like he's just not involved a little bit.
Well, he was missing for the first, and so it transpired. I discovered this after we talked last week, that these 2 episodes were the 2 episodes that they made at the start of production when he was missing. And this one was made when she was missing for the first 2 weeks as well, I think. It's just odd that they've put them together, so close together in the middle of the series. But then I suppose if you've only got 8 episodes, but then I think I'd have put them 3rd and 6th or something. Anyway, did I enjoy it? Yes, I've got one really massive problem with it. And I wonder if this is RTD's Kablam in some ways. Kablam is very much a metaphor, right on the nose metaphor for what's going on in our world, right? And a lot of people were unhappy with the sort of conclusions it drew. I got to say, I really enjoyed this, but I was really unhappy with the conclusions it's drawn. And Matt has kind of hit it on the nose there. He says the girl at the sort of head of the show, the one whose eyes were seeing it through, he says it's interesting and weird and sort of, I don't know, I guess maybe exciting in some ways that our sort of, character, our intro into the story is a psychopath. I'm like, yes, because Russell T Davies has drawn her as a psychopath. And then he's put that scene in at the end to sort of like really hammer home how much of a psychopath she is and everybody else here are. I'm like, if I was writing that story, I would want you to have sympathy for that character and the situation that she's been put in. It is not her fault that she's living this life. She's been thrown into this life. People don't get born with a sort of silver spoon in their mouth. They get born and then somebody puts a silver spoon in their mouth. Do you know what I mean? I don't think the way the episode ended was the same as everything else about it, really heavy-handed. But I'm like, I wasn't that keen on it because I think it made the same sort of error as Kablam did. It kind of sort of lost its politics at the end by trying to, I don't know. Let's talk about the headcanon-y stuff first. We can maybe come back to these things later.
Yeah.
Kelly, also known as not the Ian we were expecting. Tell me about some of the things then that you noticed were interested in about this.
I take it we're in spoiler territory from the off.
Nobody's watching us before they've watched the episode.
Just, you never know. Someone I'd hate for someone, because I think one of the things I really liked about this, and I tell you what, having rewatched half of it because I suddenly found out I was coming on this, so I went and hit I rewatched all the way up to the midpoint, and it really, really is. I've loved it anyway, and it's brilliant on a rewatch. Absolutely brilliant when you know who she is, because that revelation, she's horrible, and a lot of people have said, well, I didn't want to watch these people because she was so obnoxious, but you don't realize quite how obnoxious they are. Basically, they're kind of like the sort of Hitler Youth type people that are in what's it called, in Metropolis, the people that live in, the people that, the blonde people that live in the upper story of Metropolis,
The Johnson,
which sort of and so it's got that thing going on, and she is so horrible all the way through, but just in that subtle way. I mean, the way she says, where is it? I've got.
Oh God, you've got notes.
We don't.
Oh, I've got notes.
You're sacked.
I know.
Coming back.
I think it's also a bit of a test of who you are, because there's a bit where the doctor says, what have you lot got in common? When you watch it for the second time, everybody's white. That's what they've got in common. So there's a bit. Have you noticed that? But then the way she talks to him, and I am at least proud of myself as someone who is white, but you'd like to think of yourself as progressive. But I did pick up on when she said, I thought that you just looked the same. Made me go, what? I did at least sit back when she said that little bit. And then there's a bit later on when she says he is going to be so disciplined, but listen to him. That was very much that kind of, that he was a black man coming into their world. And it's not just out of the blue when it all happens at the end. It's out of the blue a bit, and it is for the doctor. But when you watch it again, it's totally not out of the blue. She is horrible and entitled, and she's just politely racist to this black man that comes in, because that's not part of her world. And it's brilliant. It's absolutely brilliant.
I've got a couple of questions about the way Russell T Davies has put this together, and so this is into caveat territory, because I've literally just come from watching the episode.
Yeah.
And I was spoiled for the ending, so I knew that was coming. So I knew to watch out for it. So I was able to watch out for that the entire way through. But watching out for that the entire way through, I was thinking that maybe the spoiler that I'd seen must be wrong, because she does that sort of entitled thing to him when he appears on the screens, but basically that's just what she's like with everybody, really, or that's the way she is. I didn't. No,
I disagree on a rewatch, because there is. But my problem is she is kind of dismissive, but
my problem is this.
Definitely.
If everybody on those calls, on all of those calls, for everybody on that entire planet, in that entire community, is white, how come when a black guy turns up on a call, everybody's not, hang on, what's going on here? How can they just accept it? Because that doesn't, to me, that breaks the logic of the story.
I took it as the doctor poking up was an unwanted swipe right moment. Not that they didn't know who black people were, but they were actively sort of sidelining black people as people they don't want to associate with. So he was a sort of an external intrusion, almost like
on that first call, she doesn't block him until she's heard why he's there. When he first turns up, she doesn't block him straight away. It's weird.
Yeah. I think it's something. For me. Yeah, I can see that, but I think it's also something Russell T Davies has always done really well. Is right bigotry, really well. He did it. Recent example with the misgendering in Star Beast, and he did it in Queer as Folk. He has people just being very casually bigoted, and I think, especially when you go on a rewatch, the lines are delivered just that little bit differently when she's referring to Shita Gatwa. She is just that little bit more dismissive. She is a little bit more, okay, I'm talking to her, almost like, I'm talking to a servant now, and oh God, this person is on a different level from all the other people. And I know when it happened, I mean, that bit at the end where you suddenly realize she's going to like let the what's his name, Ricky September, die in her stead, and you go, oh my God, she's horrible. And then the revelation that they're a colony of racists, and the doctor, that is just brilliant, because there's been a lot of talk of the Doctor. Is the Doctor just going to land, and we're going to live in is the tone of this Doctor Who going to be that no one ever notices his ethnicity? And to then drop it in this one, which looks all shiny. It was all shiny and probably a bit kablammy, like you say. I thought was especially rug pulling. I just thought it was, to my mind, it was kind of masterful. Russell T Davies at his best. And also, I would say, before we even get onto my headcanon stuff, but I would also say, I think she's a dark mirror of Linda with a Y. She's even called Lindy. So Linda with a Y is someone who's in the system and is a bit of a moron, and then gets redeemed, and she ends her life like, her best self because she's met the Doctor. This, you expect that to happen every single time. And I think that's why it's especially the Doctor saved a bunch of arseholes. He still wouldn't do anything differently, but he has still saved a bunch of arseholes. Yeah, and I think subverting that is also why this is a genius episode.
That's why I quite liked it in the end. Yeah, is because this is RTD at its sort of cynical peak, and I think he's more cynical this time round in RTD2. I think he's grumpier, and I think he's more critical of society, and he's less idealistic, possibly because of the government we've had since and the world since, and social media and the American government, that he's just become a lot more, and possibly because he's got more power this time. He's got more, because between RTD1 and RTD2, he spent a lot of time appearing in like speeches and conferences, really letting rip about his politics and about his sort of ethical approaches. So I think he sort of generated that within himself. Now he's presenting it on screen. This does encapsulate that, but in a really sort of dark, cynical way. And I think for one episode, that's quite interesting.
I like it. I think it should be in every episode, and it pretty much has been. And I think that becomes a theme for the series, and hopefully that's a theme for RTD on Disney. Is that every week they'll address something. I think that's great. I just think in this particular case that I think he's sort of skipped a generation here. I think it's the fault of the parents, and he has the parents off screen and kills the parents off. I just wish there'd been a slight investigation of, well, why have these children been sent here to this place? What is it that they're doing? Because that whole thing, I mean, I've only just literally come off watching it, but I couldn't work out why the kids were in this place on a different planet. So
the other thing is, I didn't see them as children particularly. I saw them as sort of mid-20s who still consider themselves as children. So it's kind of like adults who would still live at home potentially, but have been given this sort of gated community.
I think the point is they've all been sent there by parents, haven't they? That's kind of made quite explicit, and I couldn't work out. So everything else was pretty much plain as day, right? But I couldn't work out that aspect of it.
So I didn't see them as being sent there. I saw them as being effectively bought a home. So they're living in
on a different planet.
But in sci-fi terms, that's I'm living in a gated community that my parents have bought me a house in, and I'm living very, very comfortably. I'm now in my mid-20s. So they should have responsibility for themselves. So they act like children, but I don't think they are children. That's why my sympathies weren't really with them, because for all the I'm phoning mummy now she still looks after me, I think that's just adult babies who should know better.
I think the problem with any RTD is that if you start picking away at the logic, it does kind of fall apart, doesn't it? Because he talks in his metaphor, and he doesn't really care too much about making the sort of building blocks of the universe add up the way it probably should. So maybe I'm picking at the wrong things. I mean, I didn't do this last week.
I mean, it's a symbolic sci-fi, so it's
sort of, I just couldn't see what the symbol was for that place.
Well, to me, it was a sort of paradise of not having to work, which is, like she says, it's Love Island, a planet that's Love Island. It's we work 2 hours a day and then we party. That is an aspiration of, what do the scions of rich kids do? They jet around going to.
But shall I tell you specifically the thing that I couldn't get my head around, like literally as I was watching it, maybe a second go won't go. It's not that the kids were there at this place, but that it seemed to be that the episode was telling us that the parents had sent them there. And it felt to me like, well, why do the parents want to get rid of their kids? Because that's what it felt like he was saying. The parents want to get rid of their kids. Yeah,
no, I think you're onto something then, as a flaw. Yay, we've Doctor Who fans, we've agreed on a flaw. But no, but that was the one thing that I did think it was a little bit, actually, why have they been sent away? Why is Sue Twist saying, I bought you this, look up to the sky? But you know what, it just made me, I basically went, that's the ruling classes, the Bullingdon Club, etc., being sent to boarding school. So that's how I accepted. The bit that and I haven't finished my rewatch yet, so it might be explained, I didn't quite get why these monsters were killing all the human colonies, including the home world, and where they came from.
We said it was because the ball, the dot, had gained sentience or something. That's the same problem as you get at the end of Smile with Peter Capaldi. I don't believe in that for a second. But that was the only connection he made.
So because that was my main problem. But the fact that does it, and also I get what you're saying about the fact that these people are probably blameless because it's not their fault they've been brought up in the Third Reich, but they're still Nazis. So because they're Nazi youth, so they maybe it would have been a bit too syrupy if they'd all gone, oh my god, I can't believe I used to be a racist. But actually they've all grown up, and the Doctor does get to wreck a load of people. Maybe when Big Finish does a thing about the colony and in the Wildwoods, you'll find out that some of them stop being racist. It did make this isn't even the heading that I got, but it's linked to it. It kind of made me go, oh my god, that colony out there, they're going to start having a sort of foundation myth, and the foundation myth definitely doesn't want to have that we're all saved by a black guy. And I love that as it's sort of so she'll go, oh, it was actually Ricky September saved us all, and that hasn't even got us onto how Paradise Towers was this episode.
But on that point, as she goes away in the boat, everybody else is looking ahead to the future, and she's looking back at the Doctor. And I did wonder if what you're supposed to take from that is actually he has changed her mind, and she's going away on the boat with her mind changed.
Totally, she is very disappointed with herself at the very least, because she's killed Ricky September, and she also knows she's been saved by someone. And I think you can take away that the beginnings of of change are there, and even if they're not, some people. One thing I hate in films and TV is when racism gets cured, like it's a bit of flu and you've taken some Lemsip and you're not racist anymore, because that changing how you've been brought up is very, very difficult. And I think it would be too neat if they all suddenly stopped being racist. Then it would be like some weird kids program. But the fact is, they've all been saved, and they're very thank you, tall black man. But we're still racist. Bye. And that's brilliant on the Doctor as well. And I think it turns, like you said, if it had been every episode, then we'd get used to it. But most of the time, the Doctor saves everyone and changes people for the better. This is kind of like Kablam meets Horror of Fang Rock. He doesn't save it. He doesn't. He just saves people, but they're all bastards.
I really like the way
even good people that he saves.
RTD brings it back to the concept of the series as well, because they don't just resist being saved by the Doctor. They kind of take the piss out of the idea of the TARDIS and the Doctor and his adventures. And I think that's RTD saying racists really don't get Doctor Who. If you're racist, you probably won't understand the joy of the series. So it's kind of a mission statement for the series in general as well.
Yeah.
He also brings it back to the concept of the series, the entire series. It's the central concept of this series is abandoned children. So that's Ruby Sunday, that's the Doctor, that's the Space Babies. The whole series is about abandoned children, and this is another story about abandoned children. Do you know what would have saved the racism aspect for me, or would have made, or what I think might have been an addition that would have worked? So, okay, like Ian says, you don't cure racism by just saying, hey, don't be a racist. And everybody goes, oh, you're so right. I shouldn't be a racist. But what you should do is have somebody say, don't be a racist. What I didn't like about that scene is that Ruby Sunday just stands there and watches it play out. I think she should have stepped up and said, stop being a racist, not in so many words, had some kind of a speech or some kind of a powerful moment. And they should have laughed at her and said, what are you talking about? But she at least should have stepped up. As it was, she just kind of looked embarrassed.
I thought that was a character point because Ruby Sunday's adopted by black parents or a black parent. She's obviously experienced this all of her life. So she's looking at them kind of expecting this and knowing that they're irredeemable. And, probably she has less sympathy for them.
It's a bit like a bit like that beat in the Star Beast where the dead naming happens. And Catherine Tate, Donna Noble, instead of having a go at the kids for dead naming, just sort of turns around shamefacedly and says, "Oh, bloody kids! Oh, I'll have to talk to them later," or whatever. It's like, no, Donna Noble would not let that stand. She would give them hell rather than just talking to her daughter and saying, "Oh, I'm sorry about that." So, and
maybe
Ruby Sunday here, she should have said something. She should have had a reaction other than embarrassment, I think.
I think this is part of my view that RTD is a lot angrier and a lot more cynical now, that he's presenting these things. Like in the past, he would have presented the world as being something that needed saving and rescuing. But now, I think what we're seeing is the world is full of assholes that won't be saved, whatever. It's full of basically Trump supporters who will believe anything regardless of how much trouble Trump gets into, for example.
Oh yeah, and they're not going to guarantee the presidency this week, isn't
they're not going away, they're not going to be saved, they're not going to have their minds changed. And it's this thing, this is what Dot and Bubble is about. It's about people won't have their minds changed. You can't break them out of the bubble that they're in. And there's no solution to it. That's why I think the episode is quite interesting, because this is an unsolvable problem that the Doctor's faced for once. Or it's happened a few times, but for once the Doctor can't rescue these people. He can't fix the situation. All he can do is just gob on himself a little bit in anger and then go into the TARDIS and disappear. Which is why I quite for one moment, and it hasn't been like this series. I mean, there have been themes this series that have been similar, but it's that ending that I thought was quite refreshing in a kind of a downbeat way, because he just gets into the TARDIS and go. They don't have the dance routine that they had in the Devil's Court. That might have been a little bit inappropriate if suddenly they'd had like a musical moment at the end. Like
everyone's a little bit racist.
Something out of Song of the South movie.
I'd like to rewatch the ending, and I will do. But isn't there a bit where Ruby just sort of, isn't she almost going, "Come on, Doctor, you know what they're like," in her body language?
Yeah, like, I don't know. I've literally just come off.
Leave it. They're not worth it. And maybe her shout would have been.
But also in series terms, we know that that's the first scene that, or having watched the great Doctor Who Unleashed. We know that that's the first scene that Ncuti Gatwa acting. That's his first scene on set in his first block of whatever. And I think that moment is kind of, even though it's not the first scene to be shown or the first moment to be shown, that's still kind of like his audition piece for the program. And RTD slightly hyperbolically does say, "I've never seen a performance like this," when he's reacting to the frustration and not being able to say them.
Rassilon in the End of Time.
I've seen performances a bit like that, and it's
Yeah,
it was good,
Rassilon in the end of time.
yeah, it was a good performance, but but I think the focus was on him rather than her. So her job as an actor and a character was to sort of react to his anger rather than intervene, I think.
Yeah, I mean, to bring it on to my headcanon theory.
Oh, see, I was hoping we'd do what I normally do with Dylan and Matt and everybody, and keep referring to this thing that's going to happen, and then every time it's about to, change the subject. I especially do this with John.
Yeah. Oh, I'm a writer, so Chekhov's headcanon moment. And well, now we'll go off on tangent, and the readers will be like, "God," the listeners will be like, "Go on, talk about it." Oh no, we're going to talk about something else now.
We have
what was
listeners?
I saying? Yeah, I can't remember what I was going to say. I've lost
Something
my link
about
now.
headcanon.
You have a really interesting bit of headcanon that you've built up to for about half an hour.
Yeah. And I started off on a link that was really good. What we were just talking about? We were talking about Ruby, and so one thing Ruby says, you still have battery problems, and to link to what you said, JR, but I always think you still have racism. She's in the future, and we live in a time when we do, even though things have slid back quite considerably, we do still, in sci-fi terms, think we're heading towards Star Trek, that it's going to be humans are humans and there won't be racism. And where this links is because I'm just doing the rewatch of season 11 for Joe Ford's and Rod's Strictly Come Hamster.
Knife.
Yes, but I love that. But yeah, so the episode of Rosa is one of those episodes where it is good, but the guy in Rosa is from like, do they ever place him? He's from like the 50th century or whatever. He's got time travel and he's coming back and he's still a white supremacist. And no one says in that, you're still a white supremacist. And the human race is now stretched across, however many hundreds galaxies, millions of light years, you're still a white supremacist. No one ever says that. And I know Marjorie Blackman wasn't 100% happy with the final result. So I wonder what else was in Rosa. But that really bothers me. But what I now have done in my head, because I spend my time fixing things when I'm watching it to make them go, is his civilization started in this episode. So Krasko is born several thousand years after this episode from this bunch of bastards that the Doctor saves. So I just really like that. That's why they stay white supremacists and get worse. And at the heart of their society is the fact they were all saved by the Doctor when he was a black man.
So your headcanon is that there is one group of white supremacists left in the future.
Maybe, but it bothered me as a writer myself that you wouldn't address that fact.
I think there's
maybe this lot and maybe Krasko are all Thals because they're all blonde and beautiful and Aryan and
there's this kind of there's this kind of fallacy that I know winds because I've met a load of historians in various capacities, and there's a fallacy in history that winds a lot of historians up. That it is like Star Trek, that the human race in general is improving and getting morally better, and that the past is dark and we're gradually bringing light. And actually, that's not what happens over history. History is full of assholes, basically, who rise up and then fall down. And in general, history the world doesn't get better. It just goes in cycles of awfulness.
That's short-term history, but long-term history, I mean, depends whether we see out long-term history, doesn't it? We have gone from crawling up out of the mud.
Also, we've gone from having a black man as emperor of the Roman Empire.
No, but evolution in history is different. That's why it's prehistory. So I'm talking
that's what I'm talking about. That's why I'm talking about the long term,
which is the history of which is the history of civilization.
Yeah,
civilizations.
Yeah, but I also think we're we changed the way we're awful. The Romans were awful in many ways, but they weren't racists because they had an African emperor. But then we went through the colonial period and slavery, and then that entrenched our current, and no matter how woke, for want of a better word, we might think we are, we've still got these things stuck in our head from the past recent history of the past few hundred years. So in a way, we're shedding one lot of awfulness, but there's just probably going to be another one along.
Yeah.
In a whole different way. But in terms of world building, well, yeah, there's all that, and that is just a whole other.
And I think the
whole other lot of awfulness.
I think the point of this episode is that awfulness. It's not just doesn't just come out of nowhere. It comes out of isolation with similar sorts of people. So if you get in a bubble with people that basically don't argue with you or aren't different, then you end up in a cycle of groupthink and the same thoughts that leads to things like racism or homophobia or all of this awfulness. So awfulness comes from a lack of getting a passport and going abroad, or
it was very it was very subtly done in this episode, but I think it was like the echo chamber was a visual representation of the bubble.
Yes.
But
I think
I know, very clever.
But I think that's why I came out of the episode. My initial reaction coming out of the episode was, why is the Doctor not interested in the bubble, in breaking the bubble? Because the Doctor is concerned with saving the kids, but the Doctor doesn't seem to appreciate the problem is with the bubble and the environment and the place where these kids have come from. The racism thing feels almost like a weird afterthought. And I know it's not. I know it's seeded through. So I don't mean it's a weird afterthought in the plot, but it seems to be a weird afterthought in the narrative, in that surely somebody as intelligent as the Doctor, even removed slightly from the situation. It's like the Happiness Patrol. If the Doctor had turned up in the Happiness Patrol, not realised that it was an evil civilization, but just wanted to save everybody from the pipe people.
But the Doctor does nothing else through this episode other than trying to get them to break out of the bubble, whether it's their personal bubbles or he's trying to get characters out of the big bubbles that they're in.
But he
doesn't know why, because it's a mystery. He's solving the mystery as it goes, and actually the mystery is revealed. He gets the answer, but it's actually a really dark, cynical answer that
he doesn't find the answer. He's told it. My problem is the Doctor as a character should be able to see the problem sooner than having to be told it at the end of the episode. I don't know.
I think that's the problem with
outside the bubble.
I know what you mean. I think that was the problem the Doctor got into when he was the Seventh Doctor and then into the New Adventures, when it was like, you've made a protagonist who literally seems to know everything and he's playing 4D chess. And then you really are in a, oh my God, this character's this guy's too good at all this.
But surely with the Seventh Doctor is they've made a character who looks like he knows everything, but actually knows very little and gets himself into situations that he thinks he's manipulated, but actually it turns out that he's overstepped his bounds of powerfulness, and that's where the stories come from. The stories comes from his lack of control because he's tried to manipulate, not because he's manipulated and then everything's in his control.
But I think
he's sorry.
Go on. Well, I was going to say, okay, I'll throw this in quick. I think manipulation is the right word. The writer, as a writer, Russell T Davies, has chosen to tell a story where at the end there's a twist that everybody's a racist. And then you think back through the episode and think, oh God, everybody was a racist all the time. And he's chosen to tell that story in which the Doctor doesn't realise what's going on around him. But that's a writer's choice. So you could have told the story in different ways. And this is the way that Russell T Davies chose to tell the story, which I think is slightly problematic in terms of, I think it undervalues the character of the Doctor. Now, I still enjoyed it, and I still think it was the right message to tell. I just think Russell T Davies sometimes chooses the wrong vehicle in which to make his points.
I don't think the only twist. I think it was a twist that they were all racist, but that's not the big twist for me. The big twist is they're racist and the Doctor can't solve it. They're racist and there isn't going to be a magical anti-racism moment where they go, oh, actually, thank you for saving us. Yes, we will abandon our racism. That's the twist for me. And that's really, it is really cynical and angry. But I think that's the thing that's the thing that I'm left with after the episode, that actually I'm processing, that this is a Doctor Who story where the Doctor's finally encountered something that he just abandons. He has to abandon, and then he gets into the TARDIS and goes. That moment where he gets into the TARDIS and goes is played so abruptly and with so little fanfare. The opposite of the Devil's Cord, almost. This is the anti-Devil's Cord. It's just he gets into the TARDIS, it goes, boom, the closing titles. I think that's on purpose because it's just
also I think it leans into he's an alien, and in terms of the narrative of this Doctor, he probably hasn't thought about his ethnicity at all, and maybe this is, oh shit, humans are treating me differently sometimes and other times not, and it ties in with Capaldi not really knowing what's wrong with your eyes, or you wearing makeup, or all that stuff, where he didn't quite get visual cues and human culture. And I think sometimes he probably hasn't occurred to him. He missed what a lot of us missed, which is everyone was white, because they were all humans to him. So he missed that they're all white. Ruby missed that they're all white. There wasn't a massive sample spread.
Just a confession, I missed they were all white, but then I live in the Cotswolds. And
I missed that they were all white as well, but I did at least go, that was a bit weird that you all look the same.
Yeah.
And then the bit where he goes, he's going to be so disciplined that he's not as stupid as he looks. All these little things that were she just turned the rudeness up to like 11 in that very dismissive. She's on a plantation, in a segregation era America, just being slightly obnoxious, and more obnoxious if someone's black.
I think where I missed it is because there was also a sort of, with Ruby, through the lens of Ruby, there was a working class privileged lens you could watch it in, and if you saw them just as privileged, then that rudeness, that's just a sign of privilege, and that sort of isolation. And the fact that they were white didn't surprise me, because it felt like a privileged gated community to me.
To be honest, I spent the whole episode thinking this is an episode just about a bunch of Matts, right?
Yeah, I mean, obviously, I live in the Cotswolds. I have a fairly privileged life, but that's what I saw, because it had that sort of working class dimension as well, because that's what Ruby was talking about. How working class Ruby is, I'm not sure, because they have a huge flat in Highgate somewhere in London, which is well beyond even the rent of like anybody other than very privileged people.
There is a line trying to explain that about rent control, isn't there?
Yes, yeah,
there is. Also, you could, if you bought a house in London and then never moved. I know lots of people that the house I grew up in, if my parents hadn't moved to Yorkshire, because I grew up in Twickenham, it's 2 million now. It was nothing back then. If we'd stayed put, we'd be living in a £2 million quid house in London.
Being a postman,
and all it is a house.
Postman. Yeah. Being a postman, you tend to see the houses that have been passed on from generation to generation of families. And there's a road where I deliver to now, where years and years ago, somebody I knew said their gran had lived in the same house on that road. So this is a house in what is now a really sort of high-end area of the city. And I can't remember, because this was 15, 20 years ago, but I'm pretty sure they said that her rent had been fixed at £20 a month, £15 a month for the past 40 years or something.
Well, you do get peppercorn rents,
yeah. So there you go. It happens, right?
Yeah. It's I think of all the things to pick on in episodes of Doctor Who. Why are they living in the wrong house? Is It's maybe
I'm
not
your
top
story
of the
boy.
list. But yeah. But it's yeah.
Ian, did we get through your headcanon? I'm so
Yeah,
lost
that
in
was.
this
I mean, it
conversation.
wasn't. Maybe I built it up too much, but that was basically it. But I also,
Oh,
I
you see,
think it
now
was
you need to give us more.
also. But I do like I do like the idea of, you know, this is what we do at Cutaway Comics. Is it's a reminder of every Doctor Who episode is like a pilot episode, and then the Doctor moves somewhere else. So I could
Yeah.
imagine either Big Finish or a spin-off, or even the show itself returning to these characters. There's such a brilliant it was a springboard into what happens next, and I love that. What are a bunch of useless racists going to do when they move from Love Island to I'm a celebrity, get me out of here mode? And they're literally them basically all dying because they're useless.
That's my view of so RTD's in such a cynical and angry mode at the moment. The impression I got is he's suggesting they're all going to die immediately as they cross into the forest. They're just doomed, and I think that's the idea, because that makes sense of, you know, the Doctor's trying to save them from, you know, they'd rather die than go off with this Doctor in his box.
Yeah, well, again, that reminds me of I guess politics is in the air a lot, because of the general election and everything.
Because Rishi Sunak's flying a helicopter.
Yes, and I listen to a lot of politics podcasts. But one thing about far right governments and far right thinking and populist thinking is, there's a quote from Orwell that I got off one of these podcasts, so I can't take credit for it. Is national? I think it says like nationalism is a horse that dies as soon as it crosses the finishing line, and the problem with these systems is they don't work because they are so, you know, we had to fight a massive, horrible, bloody war against the Third Reich, but they hobbled themselves at the same time because of their stupid ideology. They got rid of scientists because they're the wrong ethnicity. They did mad things because they wanted to get the communists more than so their madness of their ideology made those people, you know, makes these systems break down. So
you can see it with Farage, that he's kind of lost his purpose just to get into politics briefly.
Oh yeah, the best thing that could have happened to Farage is if he had to be an MP. And we'd have all just seen, you're useless.
They try to generate their own. They try to generate issues where there aren't issues, or generate a new thing to be getting outraged about, to try and keep them in business, basically.
Oh, totally. I hate them all.
Yeah.
And but in this episode, I thought it was just quietly subversive, and for the most part, it totally worked. And, you know, as a dark side to Linda with a Y, and as a sort of nod back to Paradise Towers, you could imagine it was from the same sort of period of colonization, a similar kind of, we're all going to some, you know, we're all going to some sort of really good, really posh place to live on a planet.
Well, going back to your point about the headcanon, this is not a sequel to something. This is a prequel. This is a prequel to all those William Hartnell stories when they turn up on all the all-white colonies in the future, right?
Yeah,
so any one of those colonies in the Space Museum or whatever, the Ark, whatever, they could all have come from this place.
That's brilliant. Yeah, to explain away why Doctor Who was so monocultural on every planet they went to for so long. Yeah, that's another good one. But yeah, I just love the idea that the bit that's always bugged me about Rosa, that we have this racist from the year 50 billion or wherever he's from, the 50th century, and he's a racist.
And in the end, it comes down to the same thing, doesn't it? At the end of the show, the Doctor walks away knowing they can't solve racism. So the 2 episodes, I think that's Russell T Davies. Again, I think Russell T Davies has been on a bit of a trip through the last sort of 10 years of Doctor Who, thinking, right, that's a great idea. What would I do with that idea? Why don't I do that idea? And so he's basically repeating a lot of things.
That is how we think. Like, the fact is, you sometimes watch stuff, and you watch stuff that maybe, and just having a little, what would I do differently, makes you go create something that's a totally different story. But it starts from that, what would I do differently?
For me, the obvious comparison to this is Orphan 55, though, because that's a privileged community in a bubble with whatever outside. Chibnall made it the mutated working class, which is fine. That's a choice. So this is.
But it is basically the same choice as this one.
Yeah.
It's just that in that one you get to see behind the scenes. I mean, in this one, I guess in this one, what you've got is you're asking, okay, so going back to the point you were making a couple of minutes ago, this planet seems to exist without anybody actually sort of creating the electricity, doing the cleaning, all of this stuff. Who's doing all of these jobs? And I guess
I did like the was it ADR that they put in, effectively freak weather conditions, because they're kind of, this is a sort of a paradise, sunny LA kind of gated community, but they're filming it in Wales. So they kind of explain away potential clouds or a little bit of rain or wind. The weather satellites. The weather satellites have been affected. I love the fact that the claws of Axos or the demons still exist here in this sort of a throwaway line.
And then there's the Horns of Nymon moment where the guy Ricky September, is he called? Yeah, Ricky September calls up his parents, and you see the devastated planet. Except in Horns of Nymon, what you see is a room with a Nymon in it, and everybody's dead. Here, you get the entire planet wasted.
Yeah. Apart from the video link, which is still working, but but yeah.
I mean, So going back to something I was talking about before this series started, and I said I thought Russell T Davies was going to, and this is something that he kind of does anyway a bit, but I said I thought he was going to lean into this more, was his sort of inner Roald Dahl. So I think he's writing Doctor Who that is kind of grotesque and silly and real world, and doesn't lean into the science fiction and doesn't lean into the fantasy, but kind of I think it almost avoids the science fiction and avoids the fantasy for the sake of presenting these ideas. I think this episode feels to me, so I think the obvious comparison for this episode is probably Black Mirror, but actually I think the actual comparison for this episode is Tales of the Unexpected. I think this is sort of what Roald Dahl would be writing if Roald Dahl was around in 2024, basically. And I do think RTD has done that thing where he takes an idea each week and sort of comes up with the sort of most grotesque, but at the same time sort of High School Musical Disney version of that idea that you can put on screen. So you could 100% see the characters in this being the characters in High School Musical transposed to an outer space colony where, what do you know, they get eaten by giant slugs and it's the black guy who saves them. So I think it's a really interesting thing that RTD's chosen to do. I don't think he's entirely successful all the time, but the last couple of episodes, I think he's sort of more or less nailed it, except for a few caveats, I guess. I don't know. I'm inviting thoughts by going silent.
Yeah, my impression of this was RTD's written a Doctor Who story for once, because this is very, very Doctor Who. I can see the Roald Dahl, and I understand people are talking about Black Mirror. I think the Black Mirror bit is the dot and bubble concept, but Black Mirror would have just stayed in that concept and not broken free.
Yeah, and also, I mean, I'm very agnostic when it comes to Black Mirror. I think there's been some brilliant episodes, and other episodes, I think if you've got a passing interest in science fiction, you go, oh, that's like that 2000 AD story. That's like that J.G. Ballard story. So I don't think this sort of thing started. I mean, for me, do you know the J.G. Ballard story, Intensive Care Unit, which we are here talking to each other. I mean, this is very strange. We're talking to one another on weird technology. But Intensive Care Unit, he wrote it in the 60s, and it's about, especially during the past few years, it's about the future where there's been a big pandemic and human race is so scared of germs that we all live in cells with screens.
Right.
And we all, so he sort of saw this coming in the 1960s. And so we never ever touch, and we never ever meet other humans except on screens, and we even reproduce by we give men give their sample and it goes away and the
Yeah.
robots put it together, and then a baby is brought up by robots until it can talk as well, and then so your family is on screens, and it's it's high concept sci-fi, and in that it's very it's Ballard, it's very dark. In that, one of them goes, I want to meet for real, and when they meet for real, they can't handle it and they massacre each other and they kill each other and slice each other to pieces. It's absolutely brilliant short story. But
Machine Stops means Year of the Sex Olympics.
and there's Year of the Sex Olympics. There's all sorts of precursors. So it's not just Black Mirror. So I think young people might go, oh, he's doing Black Mirror, but people that know stuff go, Black Mirror is part of a massive big.
It's that cartoon thing, though. I think Russell T Davis's thing is to do everything. Yeah.
It's it's like Wall-E. Is Wall-E an episode of Black Mirror? Wall-E is a lot like this as well. I mean, it's it's tonally. I watched this with an 8-year-old. He didn't get the racism bit at all, but he totally got the social media bit and everyone being in a bubble. And he's not even on social media, but he got it. But he didn't. The racism went over his head. I'm pleased to say, in a way, because he just went what. Like I had to explain racism to him.
I think my little boy's gonna have the same thing when he watches this later this week.
Yeah. So today he learnt about racism because of Doctor Who. So learning moment.
It's still doing that thing.
Yeah.
Maybe that's a bad thing.
No, it's probably not a bad thing. I mean, he's just walked around going to a school with people of different ethnicities, and it's never even crossed his mind that there's a thing. So well done us. But the Black Mirror thing, I think, is just, yes, maybe this is Black Mirror does Doctor Who, but also I think Doctor Who has done Black Mirror before many times. I think the most obvious one was Heaven Sent. That's that confession dial is totally the Christmas special. That's a lot more egregious to me as a Black Mirror episode ripoff. But
see, for me, it was all about Tales of the Unexpected, not Black Mirror.
Yeah, well, they're all similar things, aren't they? They're all this sort of taking the tech of the time, the concerns of the time, and doing them in different ways. J.G. Ballard ends with people literally killing one another with scissors, and the tone is slightly different in this episode of Doctor Who, but it's still quite dark and it's still very effective. It did make me think of that Simpsons episode as well, where Sideshow Bob, they're not allowed to watch television, and it's Homer that can't resist and switches the TV on. And they do have the sort of meta line in that, as they always say. And I am very aware that I'm criticising the medium of television through the medium of television. So there is we're here talking on our screens about how awful it is to social media is terrible. But we've just all had a very positive, because of social media, sending a few things. I've only met Dylan once in real life. And I've never met you guys in real life at all. So we've had a very positive. So, the nuance of social media wasn't particularly there, and
I've just realised what RTD's metaphor is. So he's written a story about racists, but what he really was writing that story about is Doctor Who fans getting together over social media to criticise RTD. So probably. The racism is the anti-RTDism, isn't it?
Yes, we're all racist against RTD, but but I think he's all had this slightly heavy-handed anti-social media thing in years and years. And there's that bit in, is it Cucumber, where they have Julie Hesman-Houch and they're talking about the screwdriver. This is very R-rated material, but they're talking about. So I think he really hates. He really hates the effects that social media has had on society. And he's probably not wrong too, because some ugly things have happened because of social media. But the three of us are here today because of social media, over Skype in this case, And so you could also argue it's
Don't
not.
give the secrets away.
It's not. You could also say it's not. It's not. It's not the technology that makes humans awful. It's humans being awful, and you just move.
Yeah.
You invented the printing press. You didn't think someone was going to write Mein Kampf.
Well, I've always said it about Facebook and that. The social media is just a platform. It's the people who make or break the platform. It's just like a giant pub. It's like a giant pub that everybody in the world can go to all at the same time. Who turns up in the pub? It's not the responsible. Well, who turns up in the pub? The people who run the pub can't know who's going to be in the pub until they're there, right?
That's true. And
on Twitter they have a I'm not going to bar anybody.
Yeah, that's true until the pub becomes sentient, which is effectively what social media platforms are doing because of AI. So they start listening to the people that are in it, curating what they're hearing, how they're talking. So that's I think is the danger of social media. Isn't necessarily a lot of the people on it or even the groups that they form. It's the social media itself becoming so advanced that it starts controlling and curating.
What was RTD saying by the fact that at the core of this is the social media network becoming sentient and then deciding to kill everybody?
Yeah,
to kill all the humans.
I think that's what it was.
Is there a reason for that? And where did the slugs come from?
Well, I think the slugs are
brilliant, by the way. I love the slugs. The gore was just perfectly pitched. My son was absolutely jiggling with excitement because the gore was just the right side of gross.
Yeah.
A bit scary, but not too scary. I thought it was brilliant.
The bit where the guy gets the thing in his head was almost on the cusp of being my son went, the first Omen.
Yeah. No, my son literally went, that was certificate 12. He really does think in those terms. He thinks, I'm not allowed to watch this. I am allowed to watch this. Anyway, that was a bit certificate 12.
There's another telling of this story where it turns out that actually there are plenty of people of all different ethnicities around on this planet, but the social media has bubbled everybody in only with people who are like them. And so it becomes a story about confirmation bias. I wonder if that's a tricky mist, or I wonder if I watch it again, that's a trick that I'll pick up on the second time.
Yeah, I haven't got to the end, but yeah, the fact that this group of people that we meet at the end are all white. And
I'm not saying that's what he's done, but I'm saying I wonder if that's an inference that can be sort of drawn from the narrative in a sort of metaphorical way.
Yeah. I've just remembered as well the itsy bitsy teeny weeny.
Oh yeah.
I was there going, it's made me go, right, there's got to be a meaning to everything. But I did actually go right at the beginning. She's so in the water, she wanted to stay. And that is very much, she's in the bubble, she's in the water, shark in the water. Kind of, so she's in the water. She's having fun just swimming around and itsy bitsy. And that's also very clever. He's quite good, Russell T Davies.
Sometimes. Let's sum up and give this a score. Otherwise, we'll be like up to an hour and a half or something stupid.
Oh right. I've got used to Joe Ford podcasts. I thought. I was worried we were like, I'm going to book off 4 hours. Would you?
I have to pay for these though. So Joe gets his for free, but I'm on a platform I have to pay for, sadly.
Oh,
Matt, sum it up and give it a score out of 10.
I'll give it an 8 out of 10 because I did enjoy it, and I thought actually it was well made. And as you say, the gory bits were gory. I liked the effects of the creatures. I liked, obviously, the metaphor was very pleasing. I liked the darkness and the cynicism. I knocked a few points off because I think RTD is in a bubble himself, and I think it wasn't just heavy-handed the way he presented it. I think because I watched this interview on Doctor Who Unleashed, where he was so proud of the metaphor and so proud of how innovative what he'd written was, and I watched it thinking this was a fairly commonly expressed metaphor done in an effective way, but it made for a good a good solid episode for me. It wasn't as interesting as 73 Yards or as sort of different as 73 Yards, but it was different enough. It was good.
Yeah. I'm going to go 7 because I think I pretty much agree with everything you've just said, but I just coming straight off the back of it, I feel the caveats slightly more heavily weighing on my shoulders as things stand. So I might change my mind another viewing down the line when I do it with my little boy later in the week. But at the moment, I just feel that like you say, Ross T. Davies is just a bit too proud of something that's just a bit too straightforward, maybe. Ian,
Yeah,
or should I call you Kelly? I just really want to call you Kelly every time I look at you.
Call me Kelly. Well, Kelly would please. It's even worse that she didn't take my surname because we're that right on. But yeah, no, for me, I was going to go 8 out of 10 because, like yourself, JR, I think I was a film critic for many years, so sometimes I hate it when I hear people go, everything's either 10 or out of 10 or 1 out of 10, and in reality, this was a good solid 8 for me, which is 4 stars. That's very good, and for me, it's sort of joint. So far, it's sort of joint favourite with the Devil's Cord. Which I really liked. I've had troubles with Space Babies because I really have trouble with the farting. I still liked it. It just sort of dipped down a bit for me. And the Bogey Monster. That was to me it aired too far. And then
I was fine with those things. I just thought the entire episode was just a bunch of people standing there telling each other stuff.
Yeah, and there was that sort of stuff going on. 73 Yards, I still haven't finished unraveling whether I like it or not, because it's got so many. For me, I don't quite think the plot stands up in 73 Yards, but that's a whole different podcast.
On 73 Yards, this entire week, all I see is people saying, "Oh, he should have told us what the woman's saying." Oh no, he should never reveal what the woman's saying.
Yeah.
Oh, but what the woman's saying is really important, and that woman is a character who is demonstrated to have no agency in the story. She is forever 73 yards away. She is forever repeating the same actions. She is not a character with any agency. And therefore, that bit at the end of the episode where he shows her repeating the words, don't step, don't step.
Yeah.
That is all she says. She doesn't say anything other than that.
She says those last few bits every time. That's the one Unleashed I have watched, but most of the time I don't watch Unleashed because it makes I love Russell T Davies. I've never met him, but I know lots of people that know him, and he's a lovely man. But there's been an air of smugness in his interviews, which has been annoying me. And when you watch the episodes and go, that was quite clever, and then you watch somebody go, that was very clever, I'm like, ah. So, but it's not aimed at us, is it? It's like watching weird propaganda. And the podcast especially.
Just to make my point on the 73 yards, then what I meant to go on and say is, so the thing that's making everybody run away that I don't think RTD understood and I don't think the director understood is basically the Blinovich limitation effect. Something about having 2 Ruby Sundays in the same place at the same time is breaking people's brains and making them run away. I
mean, we're in danger of doing an entire podcast on 73 yards, but I've talked at length to people.
We did it last week.
I go round and round in circles over. I don't want everything explained. I just want little hints, and there were lots of them in there. I just wanted a hint as to and a consistent reaction to the lady, and why is she disgusted? And there were so many things. Why didn't? I mean, I was going to say for this episode, Ruby not picking a bunch of racists up is probably in keeping with the fact that she let sexual assault carry on in the episode before. So maybe she's not the best at making great moral decisions.
I wonder if you come from the same place as me. You don't need the writer to tell you, but what you need is for the writer to demonstrate that the writer knows the answers.
Yeah, totally. There's just little ways of, and I think some people go, it doesn't need explaining, and I go, well, that's not quite what I'm saying. So when you say I wanted it explaining, they go, no, you're a moron. You obviously want it all spoon-fed. No, I want to subconsciously know the writer isn't just making this shit up, because
exactly.
That's why I didn't watch Lost past episode 2, because they were making that up. and I could just tell. And as everyone who watched it all the way through, they were just making it up, and I hate that. If there's one thing I hate more than anything, it's people making things up as they go
I get
along.
the same.
Not know.
I know everybody loves Midnight and everybody loves Turn Left, but all I can think when I'm watching either of those two episodes, and I like those two episodes, but all I can think is RTD's just making this up. He has no idea what he's really doing.
Well, I would disagree on those two episodes, especially Turn Left. I mean,
No, you're
Turn
wrong.
Left is. No, oh, sorry, but that Turn Left is amazingly well written and structured and goes everywhere, and all the things tie up really, really neatly and brilliantly, and you can watch that over and over again, and it doesn't just land emotionally; it lands plot-wise. Everything's perfect. And
But
I thought
I don't think
RTD was like a
I don't think
sloppy version of that.
Well, I was going to say I don't think RTD knows whether it really happens or not. Turn Left. I just don't think he knows whether it really happens or whether it's all in her head.
Oh no! Well, no. I think he knows it happened. It happened in a very straightforward parallel universe, and then that parallel universe was stopped because Donna jumped in front of a lorry, and in that sort of sci-fi way. Because obviously, when there are real parallel universes and the universe gets rewritten, none of us know. It happens all the time, but none of us ever know. But in sci-fi, it happens. And then there's a slight bit of it leaks over into the person, and she can go, "She told me, Bad Wolf," and that's just brilliant. I mean, amazing. That was an amazing period of Doctor Who, and there's a little bit of that in. I did 73 yards. I love the ending. I love the last line. I love the whole. I guess it must be now. That was brilliant. So, but it would have got a 7 out of 10 for me, and this week got an 8 out of 10. But that probably means I'm boring and like everything to be a bit trad.
On which note, I think it's time we take our leave. I guess we'll reconvene next week for what's it called? Rogue is what it's called, isn't it?
Rogue. Oh yeah, and that's the Bridgerton one, isn't it?
Yeah.
Yeah.
We get to talk about race even more because Bridgerton and race is but
we'll
a lovely
also
complex thing to discuss.
We'll also get to talk about a writer other than Kate Herron. I mean, other than RTD, we'll get to talk about Kate Herron. So for only the second time since RTD's come back, we get to talk about somebody else's penmanship. Yeah. Until that happens, I was JR.
I was Matt.
And I was not the Ian you were expecting. Is that right?
You've done it wrong again. Unbelievable. I
know.
We will. Terrible. We will speak again soon.
Thanks, guys.